Peace and blessings, beloved family. And thank you all once again for being here with us today on Occult Science Radio. I am Curtis Davis, aka the Illuminated One. And today we have back with us a very, very dear friend of mine who's been with us. It's been a while. But like myself and his colleagues, he's a very busy man, and I feel fortunate and honored to have him back with us today. He's just written two groundbreaking books. We had his co-author on the show last weekend, Dr. Thomas Brophy, but he is the main author of Black Genesis, as well as a new book that he just released, The Master Game. And you will know him also from the excellent DVD series documentary Magical Egypt. This gentleman has really brought ancient Egypt and its glorious history to the forefront. And for those of you who are not familiar with who I'm talking about the incomparable Robert Bauval. So this is going to be a very special treat today. So you're going to definitely want to sign in and call in for this one. So I'm going to start off by thanking our sponsors, the Occult Network. That's www.theoccultnetwork.com. And many people call us the esoteric HBO or Showtime, and we're proud of that. And you will also find a lot of Robert's work featured on the Occult Network in our premium channel, Egypt, the Ancient Civilization, as well as his content in our free content as well. So for those of you who haven't been by the Occult Network as yet, definitely pay us a visit over there, and you will see all that this great gentleman has to offer. We offer free memberships as well as a premium membership. So come by and see us, and you won't be disappointed. And you can also find us on YouTube under the Occult Network, as well as on Facebook and Twitter under the Occult Network. And if you really want to keep up with what's going on with the Occult Network and Occult Science Radio, come by and find me on Facebook, Curtis Illuminated One Davis. And come by and become a friend of mine. I love meeting new people, and once you become a friend of mine, then you will be able to keep up with what's going on with the Occult Network and Occult Science Radio. So please call in with your questions at 646-649-1987. That's 646-649-1987. And if you have a question or a comment for Robert Bauval, then please press 1 so we can see you on the switchboard and take your wonderful questions and comments. Now that I've gotten through all of that, it's time to bring our beloved friend to the forefront. Robert, are you there?
I'm here, Curtis. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Always a pleasure to have you, my friend. It's been a while. You've been doing many great things since you were last here. How are things going on over there in Egypt, and how have you been, my friend?
I'm speaking to you from the south of Spain at the moment. I was in Egypt in May and also in March, right after the revolution. As you may know, I'm not so sure if you know this, but I was born in Egypt, and I grew up in Egypt. I left Egypt when I was 20 years old. I'm 63 now, by the way. And so Egypt really is my homeland. And it's amazing. I mean, you've all watched it on TV 24/7 during January and February, and we're still under shock as to the amazing revolution that took place there, and the turn of events. One of the big changes, of course, for me, which is a welcome change, is, among other things, is the departure of Dr. Zahi Hawass at last. Actually, I wrote a piece. Maybe I should announce this. I've just launched yesterday a blog that will act as a kind of newspaper on Egyptian antiquities. So whoever wants to come and find the news and the latest events. And the first piece is, of course, about Dr. Zahi Hawass. I have the latest news from correspondents in Cairo. I'm corresponding with archaeologists, with writers, with journalists. So we're kind of replacing the vacuum that has been created since the revolution. There's a whole state of confusion at the moment. Not surprisingly, the country was turned upside down, and there is no news coming out from the antiquities. I mean, amazingly, we are not so sure who is in charge. I spoke to an archaeologist this morning in Cairo, and although there's a man called Maqsood in charge, who was under Dr. Zahi Hawass, it's not clear whether he's officially in charge. Things are very, very topsy-turvy. Anyway, that's the latest. And but I should say this: I'm extremely proud of my fellow Egyptians. They've set the scene on showing what people power is finally, and it's a wonderful thing to be in Egypt now. I know a lot of tourists are a bit worried about the situation, and the tourist percentage has dropped to about 20% of its normal take. But amazing, the country is wonderful to see now, because few people are there as far as tourists, so you have the sights to yourself. I was at the Valley of the Kings, believe it or not, on my own. So
wow.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's the situation in Egypt.
I see. Wow. You know, a lot of people seem to be glad that Zahi Hawass gone. From what I understand, he was pretty much, to say the least, an obstructionist. You know, but you know, I'm so glad he's gone now, and yourself and your colleagues, John Anthony West and Dr. Carmen Bolter, now you guys can really get in there and really bring us some powerful information.
Yes, I should hope so. I've been following the Zahi Hawass story for the last 25 years. No secret that Dr. Zahi and myself were trying to find deadly enemies. We constantly attacked each other in the press and so forth. But a lot of people didn't realize that the man had completely monopolized all the antiquities in Egypt. It was impossible to do anything without his approval, and he was so difficult, so arrogant, so obsessed with his own image that he blocked 20 years of research. But like you said, I think it's going to move fast now. We're all looking forward. I know many of the researchers are going back to Egypt. There's David Roll, Graham Hancock, which I'm seeing next week. So yeah, things move.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, yeah, enough about Zahi Hawass. Let's get to the good stuff. Yeah. You wrote two great books lately, Robert, and we're going to start off, even though we talked about it when Dr. Brophy was here, you know, really wanted to talk to you about it, because I've been reading the book Black Genesis, and it is an outstanding book. And you know, I have to send you a copy of the interview that I did with Dr. Brophy. I basically even Dr. Anthony Browder called in on that broadcast, and we were telling everybody that they have to get this book. But we heard about it from Dr. Brophy, so we're going to hear about it from you now. Tell us about the book Black Genesis, and you know, and what you hoped to, the information you wanted to really bring forth with this groundbreaking book.
Yes. Well, let me start from the beginning. Until 2006, the situation concerning ancient Egypt was, on the one hand, from the academics and the archaeologists and the Egyptologists, the status quo. I mean, they considered the Egyptian civilization to be started around 3000 BC. Everything was in textbooks, and that was that. Of course, in the early 90s, myself and Graham Hancock and Robert Schoch, John West, and a few others kind of shook the academic world of Egyptology, because we proposed with very, very strong arguments and science that the civilization of Egypt was probably much, much older than they thought. First came John West and Robert Schoch with their geological theories on the Sphinx. Robert Schoch sent a shock, excuse the pun, but he sent a shockwave around the world by arguing cogently with the hard science of geology that the Sphinx was probably thousands of years older than the Egyptologists claim. And immediately afterwards, Graham Hancock and I produced a book called Keeper of Genesis. It's titled in the States, by the way, The Keeper of Genesis and Mystery of the Sphinx. There you are. The Mystery of the Sphinx in the United States. And in this book, we use the science of astronomy, more precisely the science of precessional astronomy, and we showed that the Gizeh necropolis, which includes the three pyramids and the Sphinx, projects a date once you analyze it through the science of astronomy. Now, astronomy is the key. I firmly believe this. You probably know my earlier books, the Orion Mystery and the Egypt Code and so forth. Astronomy is the key because those who built the pyramids used astronomy to lay out the pyramids and the Sphinx and many other monuments in Egypt. And we know that their whole belief system was geared around the observation of the sky, because they left us texts, the famous pyramid texts. To cut a long story short, the situation was that I was claiming with Graham Hancock that the Gizeh necropolis expresses a date of 10,500 BC, which kind of matched the date that came up with Robert Schoch and John West with the geology. So here there was two hard sciences saying to the Egyptologists, well, you've got it wrong. I mean, the civilization is much, much older. The argument from their side was, okay, but where is the evidence? Where are the potsherds? Where are the people? There's nothing. There's nothing that can be related to that date. And in many ways, they were right. I mean, there was no hard archaeological evidence to support those theories until the late 1990s, when, and I'm sure Dr. Brophy spoke a lot about this. Tom has spoken a lot about Nabta Playa. Nabta Playa was discovered in 1974. Now, I have to repeat a bit what Tom said, I think, because I'm not too sure what he said. I presume he spoke about Nabta Playa, Curtis?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Well, let me briefly, for your new listeners, Nabta Playa is a prehistoric site which is in the far south of Egypt. It's about 100 kilometers west of Abu Simbel, the famous great temple of Ramses II. So it's about 100 kilometers west of the Nile. Unknown to the world until 1974, when it was discovered by a group of American anthropologists led by Fred Wendorf of the University of Texas. And it took them quite a while. I mean, they knew they had hit something big. They realized that they had found a very unusual prehistoric site. It wasn't like the others. It wasn't a settlement. It seems, we know now that it was a ceremonial site, a bit like Stonehenge in England, a place where people gathered to perform rituals and ceremonies. And what stunned them was the date. Carbon dating produced a date of about 7,000 BC. So the first shock was that here there were people in what is today the Sahara, it's just empty desert, that were there several thousand years before the pyramid builders.
Wow.
In 1998, everything changed, because they suspected that what they had found, very briefly, they had found conglomerations of stones. There were alignments of stones heading towards the horizon, north and east. There were mounds. There were very strange things. I've been there several times with Tom, so it's a very eerie place. However, in 1998, they brought along an astronomer, Kim Malville from Boulder, Colorado, and he immediately realized that this was an astronomical site, very much like Stonehenge. And lo and behold, the analysis of the astronomy revealed that what we had previously allocated to the pyramid builders, we thought this was original to them. They had, as you may know from my earlier books, the pyramid builders aligned the pyramids to Orion's belt. They had alignments to the star Sirius. Some alignments went to the northern stars and the Big Dipper. Strangely enough, there at Nabta Playa, the same alignments were discovered, but thousands of years before the pyramid builders. So, of course, the conclusion was what we thought was original to the pharaohs was not. And here there were people thousands of years before doing the very same thing. Now, what we began to realize slowly is that what happened really is that because of dramatic climatic changes, those people, whoever they were, by the way, we've coined them the star people, and you'll see why. Yes, because they seem to have been totally obsessed with stellar observation. There is reasons for this, and I'll explain in a minute. However, the conclusion was that when the desert, or rather the Sahara, became super arid, with no more water, the wells were dry, these people who had developed a rather sophisticated science of astronomy, who had the ability to move very large stones. That's what you find at Nabta Playa, by the way. Huge boulders that have been moved around. And also who had domesticated cattle at a very, very early stage, about 9,000 years ago, were obliged to leave the Sahara and find a more suitable place to settle. And the logic is that they went to the Nile Valley. And with this cargo of knowledge, kick-started the pharaonic civilization. Now, I should say that this is widely accepted now by Egyptologists. I mean, it's not just a theory. We found evidence of these people at the Nile Valley. And of course, what seems to tie up with all this is that we only can trace these people at Nabta Playa till about 3,500 BC, and then they disappear. Well, the odd thing is that the pharaonic civilization starts at around 3,500 BC. So, of course, we connect the dots, and it seems almost certain that they're responsible for the pharaonic civilization. But here comes Black Genesis, because who are these people? And the odd thing about Nabta Playa is that although there is all these mysterious stones and tumuli and strange graves with cows in there and stone alignments to the stars and so forth, perhaps I should say at this stage that some of the alignments, you'll have to interrupt me because I'm one of those guys who keep going, by the way.
Oh, no, that's what I brought you here for, my friend. Please continue.
Well, I should say this because Nabta Playa isn't just the oldest. By the way, it's labeled the oldest astronomical site in the world. But it isn't just the oldest. We have clear evidence, and you'll find this in Black Genesis, the book, that these people tracked the displacement of stars due to the precession of stars. There's a wobble of the Earth that causes the stars to appear to change position. And now we, scholars, attribute this to the Greeks. They say the Greeks discovered precession around the first century BC, whereas these people were doing it 7,000 years before. So, amazing. I mean, they weren't just doing stone alignments towards the stars and the rising sun and so forth. They were actually tracking precession.
Wow.
In other words, they were very sophisticated. sophisticated astronomers. Now that changes the whole picture. It tells us that, whoever they were, they must have been rather developed and very sophisticated. Now the big question, who were they? The strange thing about Raptoplia, they haven't found any human remains. These people seem to have come there to perform these astronomical observations, but didn't stay there. They must have been somewhere else. And that was the huge question. Now let me go a little bit back, because this is a wonderful romantic story. I hope there is, now if you visualize, your listeners must visualize it. Egypt is a huge rectangle. It's a huge desert split in the middle by the Nile. The Nile cuts Egypt into two parts, east and west. So we have the eastern desert and the western desert. The western desert is part of the Great Sahara. I'd rather call it the Egyptian Sahara. It's a huge swathe of land the size of twice the size of Texas, I guess.
Wow.
And it's totally arid, except for a chain of oases that still exists today, hopping from around 300 kilometers from the Mediterranean, going southwards towards the southern borders of Egypt. There's about 5 oases, but the rest is just plain arid desert. Now, in the most furthest point in the southwest, where Egypt butts into Sudan in the south and Libya in the west, it kind of juts, the land of Egypt juts into these two countries. There is the most mysterious region you can imagine. And amazingly, it was not discovered till the 1920s. The very reason is that even today it's so remote that it requires one hell of a preparation to go there. It's 800 kilometers from the Nile, in open arid desert without any supply of water. You have to take everything with you. And here is the story. In 1923, an Egyptian, a rather romantic Egyptian, I usually describe him as a cross between Omar Sharif and Rudolph Valentino, if you can imagine. An extremely educated man. He was brought up in Egypt and educated in Oxford, in England. Very glamorous sort of person. He was an Olympic champion in sword fighting. I'm not quite sure what it is. And he, among other things, he was a great seducer. He's well known in Egypt, in Egyptian history, for having had a rather heated affair with the Queen of Egypt, the last Queen of Egypt, whom they say he married her in secret, but that's another story. Anyway, this man's passion was the desert. His name is Hassanein Bey. You'd read a lot about him in Black Genesis. His whole story is in part 2. We're thinking of making a film, by the way, on this man.
Wow.
Yeah, very romantic character. Anyway, he took it upon himself to organize an extremely daring expedition, never done before, to go and explore the southwest of Egypt. Nobody had been there. There were rumors of strange oases, of lost cities, sort of Shangri-Las of the desert, and he was very keen to go there. He organized a camel expedition that began its route from the Mediterranean in the north, and went amazingly, did a trek of about almost 2,000 kilometers, and reached that spot in the southwest, that corner, and he discovered what today we call Jebel Uwainat. Jebel Uwainat is a small mountain range, about 30 kilometers in diameter. It is the most mysterious place you can imagine, Curtis. I mean, I've been there with Tom Brophy, so I'm sure he talked about this a bit. It took us with 4-wheel drives 5 days to get there, so you can imagine the huge distance.
Oh yes.
In the desert. Even with 4-wheel drives, you can only do about 60 miles a day in this kind of landscape. So it's quite an amazing trek. Anyway, when he got there, Hassanein Bey, in 1923, he assumed that the place was totally uninhabited, completely uninhabited. And to his surprise, during the first night of camping there, he woke up and he thought he was dreaming, because right in front of him was this rather beautiful young girl, black skinned, who offered him a bowl of milk. And he said in Arabic, "What are you doing here?" And she didn't understand him. She spoke, we know now, she spoke a language called Tebu, which is the old language of the Sahara. And luckily he had a guide who could understand a bit of Tebu. And she said, "Well, we live here, and my people are in the mountains. You can come and see them. And we have a king called Harry." So off he went, and he actually met this king called Harry. And Harry said, "Oh, we've been here a long, long, long time. And in fact, our ancestors left us their drawings." So he said, "What's that?" And he was taken to see rock art carved on the hills and on the rocks and in the caves. It's full of it. I mean, the place is full of this. It's a kind of archaeological museum right there in the middle of nowhere. And to his amazement, the rock art showed fauna, animals that shouldn't have been there. Lions and giraffes and elephants and hippopotamus and all sorts of animals that require masses of water. And of course, they couldn't exist as the desert was in those days. When Hassanein reported this to the National Geographic Society in London, they quickly realized, and this is the beginning of climatic studies, they realized that the Sahara must have been very different in prehistoric times. But what Hassanein did not... Can I carry on, by the way?
Sure, most definitely. Go ahead, my friend.
Yeah, well, cut me short if you want to ask something else. Well, what Hassanein had missed was a much larger mountain range, and the reason he missed it is that he had bypassed it by 100 kilometers. He was skimming the western borders of Libya. When he returned to Cairo and reported this to the Geographical Society in Cairo, who got very interested was one of the royal princes, Prince Kamal ad-Din, who said, "Okay, I'm going to go there." And here's the interesting romantic story. He contacted the Ford company, and they built for him the very, very first four-wheel drive. Mm-hmm. It looked a bit like a tank, sort of cross between an old Ford T and a tank. And he had 3 of those built. And he took a different route from Egypt rather than along the Libyan border as Hassanein had taken before. And because he did that, he hit the mountain range that today we call Gils Kibir. Now, let me give you a description of Gils Kibir. Gils Kibir is about 300 kilometers long. It's about 80 kilometers wide. I mean, can you imagine that nobody knew it was there? It's like the size of Switzerland, and I describe it as Switzerland without the trees.
I see.
It's an enormous mountain range. Some of your listeners may have seen the film, The English Patient, where the Lady Clayton dies in the famous cave of swimmers. That's where it is, by the way. And Kamal, do I hear kids screaming?
Oh no, that's outside my window. They're outside playing.
Okay. Okay, let me carry on, because this is the fascinating part. What Kamal ad-Din, Prince Kamal ad-Din found there was rock art, much more rock art. This time the rock art showed people, lots of people, and it's very clear that these people were of black skin. They were rather attractive people. They're very tall, I went with Tom Brophy in 2008 to see all this. And it's amazing. I mean, we were very fortunate and privileged to enter a cave that a friend of ours had discovered hardly a month before. We were the very first to enter it. The rock art was totally undisturbed. It looked like it had been painted a week before. Beautiful stuff. And you'll find pictures of that in the book, by the way. And it's very clear that the people were, like I said, black skin, rather sophisticated. They wear jewelry. They live in houses. They clearly have domesticated cattle. They have paddocks with cattle. And they seem to be very, very happy. All the scenes that you see, they're holding hands, they're dancing, they're wonderful, wonderful scenery. And the question now was, were these the people that populated Naphtali? In other words, were these black-skinned people the people who kicked off the civilization of Egypt? And to cut a long story short, because I could go on for hours, the evidence is overwhelming in support of this hypothesis. So the bottom line, and hence the title of our book, is the civilization of Egypt, the origins of the civilization of Egypt. Its very beginning is kicked off, is the product of a black prehistoric people that lived in the Sahara for thousands of years before. They came down to the Nile Valley about 3,500 BC with their cargo of knowledge, their astronomy, their cattle, their knowledge of construction, and a few thousand years later you've got the pyramids. So that's the whole story in a nutshell. There is much more to explore now, because the question is, where did they come from in the first place? And I'm not quite sure if Tom covered this, but well, we know now from genetic studies, particularly genetic studies done by Oppenheimer in Oxford, tracing what we call the mDNA, which is the female gene, that everybody on this planet, you, me, everybody who is alive on this planet, is the descendant of a single female that lived in Central Africa about 200,000 years ago. It's a fact now. And of course, she almost certainly was black skin. She was a black African lady. We don't know what happened because prior to that, of course, there were human beings, but they were not Homo sapiens. They weren't like us. Something happened. Whatever happened, the human race mutated, and she gave birth to the very, very first Homo sapiens. The studies show that about 60,000 years ago, a contingency, a small contingency, probably 150 people, moved northward. And it is from these 150 people that the whole world is populated today. So we know that. This is a fact. What Tom Brophy and I have tried to show is that some of these people settled south of this area we're describing, south of Gils Kibir, this mountain range, and Uwainat, where the rock art is, in what today is the Chad. The reason we say this is that we found similar rock art with similar designs in the mountains of the Tibesti in the Chad. So we've got the roots. We know how they moved. But we need to explore more. I mean, unfortunately, with the Egyptian revolution and the civil unrest in the Chad, it's rather difficult. But Tom and I are planning, hopefully in the next year or so, another expedition, because we want to literally go to the very source of where these people kicked off. So that's the adventure of Black Genesis.
I see. I mean, it's a great book, Robert, because I've been reading it as well. And like I told Dr. Brophy, and I have to tell you as well, what I can most appreciate in reading the book is that you and Dr. Brophy, you basically came out and told the truth. I mean, it's something that has been known for quite some time, but for some reason or another, the Egyptology community refused to let everyone know that.
You know,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say that part of the problem was in fact Dr. Hawass, because unfortunately he was in charge when naphtha playa was discovered. And, you know, it's kind of sad to say, but most Egyptologists were rather unwilling to cross him. Now, of course, many are speaking out, but during those 25 years, no one dared to cross him, except people like myself and John West and Graham Hancock, who were outside the academic circles. And he was very, very against the idea. If any suggestion was that the origins of Egyptian civilization was of black African origins, he would go into a tantrum, and no one dared to confront him. But the fact it's now scientifically demonstrated. I mean, this is what Black Genesis does. We're very proud of this book because it isn't just a theory. I mean, we actually went there. And people can go there if they want to do the expedition and see for themselves. I mean, you know, the amazing thing is they left us their images. You can see them, you know, and you can see these original people. They left us all over the Sahara their fingerprints, stone circles, alignments, artifacts. So this is hard evidence. You know, we're not talking about vague theory. So this is really what Tom and I have done, is to bring up. I'm going to say something that I love saying. I've said it in England. I've said it in Washington. I gave a talk, as you probably know, at the University of the District of Columbia.
Oh, yes.
Tony Browder was there. And at the end, I just had to say it. I said, I'm a black man turned white. Because that's what we are. You know, it's just the packaging. You know, it's the truth, and it's a wonderful truth because it kind of brings us into one family. I mean, we all have the same roots. We all have the same origins. Everybody on this planet has the same ancestors. And that's it. You know, no more discussion. I hope.
True, and I'm glad you also pointed out, you know, where we all come from. You know, this woman that is the mother of civilization. So that totally debunks what we've been programmed to believe in the Bible. You know, how everything started with Adam and Eve and so on and so forth. You know, so this totally, that's why I love this book so much, because this book is the whole truth and nothing but the truth. You know,
we actually, it's not us who have coined the name, it's actually Professor Oppenheimer in Oxford. They call her, whoever she was, the African Eve. A wonderful, wonderful thing to realize that somewhere in Central Africa 200,000 years ago, a woman gave birth to the people of the world. I mean, that's basically what she did. She created the first Homo sapien, and here we are talking across the ether on Skype. So, for me, it's an adventure. I mean, to see myself in a much, much wider context. And I think this is what is going to happen, hopefully, with books like Black Genesis, is that people have been accustomed to see themselves in a rather short context, you know, in the short span of history that that is written. But there is a long, long prehistory, and we have to see ourselves in this vast time frame. And we belong to this. I mean, we you know. So I think this is the awakening of of human civilization now is to realize that we've been short-sighted. You know, we really can see deep now into the past and see our roots, thanks to the science of genetics, thanks to the science of paleoanthropology, astronomy, geology. All this has finally brought out, well, in a nutshell, the truth.
Absolutely. And before we turn our attention to your newer book, The Master Game, I just want to let everybody know that please go out and get this book, Black Genesis. Believe me, it is a book like no other. And at the end of the broadcast, Robert will tell us where we can get both of his books. I already have it, and I'm reading it, beloved family, and I'm telling you, I mean, I've always been a big student of Egypt, ancient Kemet, you know, however we wish to classify it. I haven't been there yet. I'm working on it. But this is one of the more informative books that I have ever read in all the material that I have ever read on ancient Egypt. So once again, Black Genesis, written by our distinguished guest today, Robert Bauval, and co-written by Dr. Thomas Brophy. Now let's turn our attention to your newer book, my friend, The Master Game. Tell us about The Master Game, because just the title alone, and I'm working on getting that book now as well. And tell us about The Master Game, because just the title alone is very intriguing.
It is, huh? Well, you'll be able to get it in a couple of weeks. It's actually being published on the 23rd of August, although you can pre-order it, of course, on Amazon. That book is co-authored with my dear and old friend Graham Hancock, whom I'm sure you've heard of.
Absolutely.
Graham Hancock is the author of Fingerprints of the Gods, The Sign and the Seal, Supernatural, which is his last book, and perhaps I should give you the latest. He's working on a novel. I won't tell you what it is because he's keeping it rather hush-hush, but he's working very hard. I'm seeing him next week. We have a conference in England, in Swindon. And, but I should say that Black Genesis, I should say that I'm still into Black Genesis mode here. I should say that the Master Game is the product of another book that we have co-published, Hancock and myself, in 2004, which was called Talisman. It didn't circulate that much in the United States. It was widely distributed in England and in Italy and various other places. Talisman was a book that took us about 12 years to put together. It's a huge study. And basically it was the attempt to explain from early history why strange layouts of cities, like Washington, for example, you know, with the Dan Brown books, and Paris and London, had rather odd layouts, rather odd monuments that were reminiscent of ancient Egypt. Those people who live in Washington will know what I mean. I mean, you've got the Washington Memorial, which is an Egyptian obelisk. You've got the Alexandria Masonic Memorial, which is a design of the Lighthouse of Alexandria, and various other things. Clearly, all these structures were associated to the Society of Freemasons. And so we decided to do a study on this, and we realized very early that the... Hello?
I'm here.
I heard the bleep. We realized very early that the source, the esoteric source that nurtured these various societies, particularly the Society of Freemasons, were two strands that came from ancient Egypt. One known as the Hermetic tradition, I'll explain in a minute, and the other the Gnostic tradition. The Hermetic tradition, very briefly, because I don't want to go into too much detail here, but is the conversion of the ancient Egyptian religious ideologies by the Greeks. they kind of mutated it. And this tradition survived, was rediscovered in the 15th century in Italy. It's a long story, it's all told in the book, and influenced very, very, very much the intellectual world. It created the esoteric strands that eventually gave birth to things like the Rosicrucians and various other secret societies, and particularly the Freemasons. The other strand is the Gnostic tradition. It is in fact the conversion of the ancient Egyptian religion, or most part of it, into Christianity, a sort of primitive Christianity. We didn't know it existed until the 1940s, when the so-called Gnostic texts were found in Egypt by sheer chance in Upper Egypt, and were studied by, I'm trying to remember his name, Professor Giles Curtis at the Carl Jung Institute. He quickly realized that these documents were primitive Christian documents that provided us with a very, very different image than what we thought Christianity was. There were Gospels of Mary Magdalena, Gospels of St. Thomas, all apocryphal Gospels that were ignored by the Church, in fact banned. So these two traditions, in many ways, were in conflict with the classical Catholic religion. And they survived, and they influenced all these societies. So we trace them across the ages. That's what the book Talisman does. And stunning conclusions. I mean, as we move and slink through the ages, we find strange events at the time of the Renaissance in Italy, during the French Revolution, and it all sort of ends in a curious way with the founding fathers of the United States and the rather bizarre ideas of laying out cities and the formulation of the Constitution, the bills of human rights. All these kind of draw from this ancient tradition. So that's what the book was. What we realized we had done while we were researching this book is that we were obliged to research through these strands the movement of the Crusades. And about, what was it, a year ago, I contacted Graham and I said, you know what, there's a huge confusion in the world. You know, I have I suppose it's the advantage, sometimes I see it as a disadvantage, but I've lived half my life in the Middle East and half my life in the Western world. I'm a kind of like a chameleon. I can go in the Middle East, I speak perfect Arabic and blend, and vice versa. I can be in Europe and I speak 3 European languages. And, having said this, it occurred to me that the world today was in a total confusion. There is a war in Afghanistan. There was the war in Iraq. We have this never-ending problem in Palestine. The uprising and Arab Spring that is still ongoing, and of course Al-Qaeda that shocked the United States. But nobody could really understand what all this is about. You know, is it about what? Why did Al-Qaeda attack the United States? What's behind all this?
Exactly.
And we realized that. Hello?
I'm here.
I seem to have an echo, but are you hearing okay?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly fine.
Okay. Well, what the master game suggests is that indeed there is a game of civilization played at extremely high level, which, if not understood, if not really understood historically, if not brought to the open, could lead us to some very, very dangerous situation, and God forbid, a third world war. There is a deep misunderstanding between East and West, and that needs to be clarified. And this is what the master game tries to do. The bottom line is that one of the turning points of modern history is that in 1917, in the throes of the First World War, while the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire, was crumbling, all the lands that it possessed, which included Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, and so forth, were appropriated by the Allies, England, France, Italy. England took over what was and what still is today the land of Palestine. And well, in brief, I have to be brief here because the book is about 550 pages, by the way. So
wow.
I'm trying to come down. Yeah, it's a book that you have to read slowly, read carefully. There's a lot of lovely stories in there. It literally spans about 2,000 years of civilization, and it brings out very clearly where we stand today. So that's the task that we put ourselves. So read it slowly when you get it. I'm very proud of this book. I'm sorry to Anyway, the event starts with the formation of not the formation, but the declaration that the land of Palestine can be handed over to the Zionist movement, to the Jews around the world. This was declared in a statement by Lord Balfour in England in 1917, famously known as the Balfour Declaration, where the King of England, George the Fifth, states openly that the Zionist organization, which at the time had its headquarters in England, can consider the land of Palestine as being the future land of the Jewish people who were in the diaspora around the world. There were Jews all over the place. There were Jews in Russia. There were Jews in the United States. There were Jews in Europe. And that created a huge problem that today is still going on and still unsettled after nearly 80 years. However, here's the problem, is that most of the protagonists that participated in this activity, Lord Balfour, Lord Rothschild, who was head of the Zionist movement, were all Christians. So it created a psychosis in the mind of the Arabs that it was some kind of plot, some kind of Western Masonic plot. But it took till 1948 for the State of Israel to be formed. As you may know, the events after the Second World War were passed on to the United Nations. Huge pressure was mounted now because a lot of immigration took place in the land of Palestine. Many Jews from around the world, from Russia, from Germany, from Poland, even from the States, started pouring in this place. And of course, trouble started. The Arabs who lived there started getting conflict, and there was civil war. And finally, the British, who were responsible, who were governing this area, declared that they would relinquish their mandate and leave. They gave a date. The date was the 15th of May, 1948. That was the date the British were leaving. Of course, the provisional Israeli government, in those days headed by Ben-Gurion and Golda Meir and a variety of others, immediately declared that they were going to announce the independent state of Israel. And the reaction in the Arab world was immediate. There was a coalition of 5 Arab states, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria, said, okay, they do that, we're at war. The situation was extremely tense. What the Zionist organization realized is that without the blessing of the United States, they just put it off. They needed the support of the United States. They still do, by the way. And then it went very strange, because when the British pulled out on the 15th of May, and the actual time was supposed to be midnight, where the announcement of the independent state of Israel was going to be announced, 11 minutes later, I mean, that's fast. President Truman wrote a personal letter which was sent by telegram to Ben Gurion in Tel Aviv, saying, the United States, me, President of the United States, fully approve the formation of this state. It's quite amazing. It's quite amazing because he took that decision single-handed. He took that decision against the recommendation of his advisors. George Marshall at the time was very against that, against the recommendation of the United Nations. So, what added fuel to this fight? Hence, why the Arabs see the Americans as really the creator of the state of Israel. I mean, you've got to understand this. It's very, very important. But what made it worse is that President Truman was a 32nd degree Freemason.
Wow.
And, yeah. So, now, what we kind of ponder, because I don't know if I'm not quite sure how much your listeners know about Freemasonry, but one of the major goals of Freemasonry, which is supposed to be a symbolic goal, is the rebuilding of Solomon's Temple. I mean, that's very well known in Masonic circles. Much of the rituals of the higher degrees of Freemasonry is the desire to rebuild Solomon's Temple, which of course is the desire of Orthodox Jews to physically rebuild the temple on Temple Mount. Today, the problem is that on that particular mount is the most sacred shrines of Islam. So we've got a problem. No. The twain don't meet. And so this is what happened. I think a lot of Americans aren't aware of this, that let me get this right, in 1998, a couple of years before 9/11, Al-Qaeda declared a jihad, declared war, and declared war against the United States. But they called them the Crusaders. They called them the Crusaders, and oddly enough, they used the term Crusader, Zionist, Masonic. They somehow imagine. Hello, Curtis, you still there?
I'm still here.
I'm hearing funny noises on the sky. The perception in the Arab world, and this is widespread, I can tell you that. I was in Dubai, I was in the Emirates, in Egypt. The perception is that there is some sort of huge plot that was hatched in 1948 between the Freemasons and the President of the United States and the Zionist organization to take over the land of Palestine and to create the state of Israel. Now, I want your listeners to understand this. I am not anti-Semitic in any way, and I think everybody has the right to live where they belong. But there's a big difference between Zionism, which is the early movement of the formation of the State of Israel, and Jews in general. In fact, there are many Jews who are very anti-Zionist. I mean, the problem is this, is that amazingly, there was a colony formed in Arab land, and that certainly was going to create a problem. It has. It's been going on for the last 60 years, since 1948, and it has eventually spawned an organization like Al-Qaeda. And if both sides don't really understand precisely what this problem is, and go down in history and realize that the battle for that land has taken place long before 1948, it started with the early Crusades. One side has to give. One side has to say, fine. I mean, both cannot win. And there has to be this removal of the obsession to own the city of Jerusalem. It has to be an international city. It has to be under the hands of the United Nations so that there is no more this claims from both sides. Otherwise, the world is heading towards disaster. You know, Iran is as we know, is very anti-Israel. They're slowly hatching the nuclear bomb, and the last thing we want is some fool pressing the button. So this is what the master game does. It kind of shows that, hey, this is a game. Wake up. You know, we're going to stop this mad game, and everybody understands it, and call a truce here. So that's it. In a nutshell.
I see. And you know, I was reading I was reading basically. I was on Amazon reading the preliminaries about the master game, and I said that once again, Robert has done it. You know, he's told the truth back to back with Black Genesis and with the Master Game, because somehow I always felt that you know, with the Freemasons, I mean, if in our society, you have two camps. You have the people that look at the Freemasons as something good. You know, I mean, I don't mean to label things here as good and bad, but you know, as something good. But at the same time, people tend to question their secrecy. But now, at the same time, as I begin to study, and once again that you've illuminated in your book with the Master Game, the Freemasons were really behind a lot of diabolical things.
Well, to be honest, I mean, you know, I know quite a lot of Freemasons. Like they say, some of my best friends are Freemasons. I'm not one myself, by the way. But it's not that. It's that sometimes with good intentions, you can produce a problem. You see, what we suspected that happened in the mind of Harry Truman, we'll never know, but what we suspect. I mean, here is a man that hardly a few years before played God. I mean, he's the only man in history so far that has pressed the button and sent 2 nuclear bombs on Japan.
That's
you know,
true.
He took that decision. He's a man who could take those big and frightening decisions. And because of his Masonic affiliation, we began to wonder, has he played God here? Has he finally said, I'm the guy who can return the land of Palestine to the Jews? He did it. The question is whether he saw it in those terms. So it's a frightening prospect that somebody's belief system, if that's the case, which are Masonic in this case, create this enormous problem that haunts the world today. And so we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to really get to the very heart of it. But let me say this, because oddly enough, we talked about Black Genesis and the Master Game. What Black Genesis does, which I stated a while ago in this interview, is that it makes us realize that we are all on the same boat here. We come from the same source. You know, there is no America, there is no Europe, there is no Iceland. We're on a planet. We're on a planet, we're all the same, we all come from the same family, and there's no reason to fight. You know, unfortunately, the differences which are created artificially, you know, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Americans, English, Chinese, these are man-made inventions. You know, and we need to perceive ourselves differently. We need, and I use the term, we need to start thinking a bit cosmically. You know, that's what I keep telling people when I go to conferences. You know, you've got to see yourself in a much wider context. You know, you not only you belong to this planet, you belong to the cosmos. You know, there's a whole cosmos around us, and to see it in. We have a lot of big echo here. Are you getting the echo, Curtis?
Oh no, yeah, I'm not seeing it. I'm not hearing it on this end.
All right. I think I'm too close to the mic. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. So in many ways, Black Genesis kind of adds the the philosophical side to the master game, because the message is at the end, this is a game. Stop seeing ourselves as Muslims on one side and Christians on the other and Western on one side and Middle Eastern on the other. We're going to make a mess of things this way. We've had 2,000 years of conflict, and we're mature enough now in our civilization to wake up and to shake hands and to say we're all from the same family. That's it. And try and create a new world. So this is, at my age, finally, we begin to see the picture in a much wider context, and that's why I'm so proud of these two books, because they kind of touch that very important point. This is no theories. This is a reality, and human beings must start thinking differently. We must.
Absolutely. We're going to pause for a quick minute, Robert, to take a question or two from the switchboard, because with this powerful information and very, enlightening information, it's going to spark questions. So we're going to take our first caller. We have a caller on the line. Caller, if you're there, please state your name and where you're calling from.
Greetings.
Greetings, beloved. How are you?
I'm doing good, beautiful ones. This is a very fascinating conversation. And I have to ask your wonderful guest, I love the artifacts that you create, the books that you create. My question to you, Robert, is, do you believe that the reason why the United States and many nations are in the Middle East is to dig up artifacts that are actually hidden in the Middle East for esoteric reasons?
Excellent question.
Well, hey, you'll have to read my next book. I've teamed up with an Egyptian journalist and author, Ahmed Osman, who lives in London. Ahmed Osman is particularly well known for a variety of books he's written, which are, he's the one who instigated the idea that many of the biblical characters are modeled on historical characters of Egypt. Such as Moses, modeled on Akhenaten and so forth. Ahmed Osman is extremely well placed to know what's been going on in antiquities in Egypt. Him and I have been following this for the last 20 years. There is a strange thing. One of the things that always puzzled me, and again, I can't go into great detail here. I've written a book, by the way, called Secret Chamber, which was published in, let me get this right, in 1999. You might be able to get a copy of it on Amazon, where the whole history of Dr. Hawas's reign in archaeology in Egypt is strangely connected to some rather powerful and extremely wealthy American characters. I'm going to be a bit careful not to mention names here, but one of them, by the way, is Rupert Murdoch. That's as far as I go now. And curious events have been happening particularly at the pyramids, where research has been done in secret, where other researchers have been kept out, and we're now wondering, over the last 20 years, what's been going on. Until very, very recently, I was there, like I said, in May, and I was at a friend's place overlooking the Giza Plateau, and there was some strange excavation going on, bang in the month after the revolution, and nobody knew who was doing it. So, to answer your question, I suspect that there is a desire to find certain things, particularly at Giza. I'm very focused at Giza and the pyramids and the Sphinx. We've long suspected, and for good reason, that there are things that may reveal rather important facts about our origin there. Perhaps under the Sphinx, perhaps inside the pyramid. It's a very exciting time now, because now that the place has been liberated, in so many words, we hope to be able to restart research. So I don't know if it answers your question. Yes, I suppose that there is a kind of cohort and rather odd attempts by certain parties, rather wealthy parties, who have been sniffing around this place and who were connected to Dr. Hawat?
No, you did answer my question. Not that I'm
I did
surprised.
Wow.
Sorry, you did or I didn't?
No, you did answer my question. Because I have found information on what you just stated, and there's a little funky business going on, and I know a lot of people in the military, and things of this nature. And, you know, when you know people in those factions, they tell you what the real deal is and what's really going down and what the illusion is. So, you know, I've always been curious to ask certain people this question. There's a lot more that that's going on that we can't really see, but I send you so much love. Keep writing your wonderful books, and I send you a lot of love, Occult Science Radio.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, beloved. It's always a pleasure to have you call in. Thank you so much. Excellent questions. Excellent questions. And I love when she calls in. She always brings such intelligence and presence. And we're going to move on to our next caller here. We have a caller from the 720 area code. Caller, if you're there, please state your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, this is Commit in Denver. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Excellent show. I love the conversation. I have read the first book he wrote, The Orion Mystery. I haven't read the recent ones. I plan on doing it soon. I have a question about the Valley of Mexico and some of the archaeology of the pyramid sites in America. And has Robert Bauval made any connection with the ancient civilizations of America and the ancient Egyptians?
Okay, can I start here, Curtis?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. I'll have to be brief on this one because the man you really want to ask is Graham Hancock. In his blockbuster, of course, Fingerprints of the Gods, that's precisely what he does. He was and still is very convinced that there was a global civilization, what he perceives as a lost civilization in antediluvian times, that connected with each other. I mean, I have to say that it's not my specialty. I'm very focused on ancient Egypt, but it is odd, to say the least, that we find pyramids, we find symbolism that is rather the same, rituals. So it's very possible that this connection existed. Maybe I should tell you a tidbit that so that you don't go away disappointed. I had the pleasure of meeting the explorer Thor Heyerdahl a few years before he died. I don't know if you remember Thor Heyerdahl. He's the man who did the famous Kon-Tiki expedition in the 1970s.
That's right.
And crossed the Pacific on a raft, and then did the famous Ra expedition crossing the Atlantic. Graham Hancock and I met him on the island of Tenerife, where he lived his last few years, and he was utterly convinced that there was connection between the ancient world across the continent. He proved it by sailing himself, and he was utterly convinced. There's evidence slowly coming out from everywhere that seems to suggest a pre or rather antediluvian phase that we've forgotten. I mean, Graham Hancock's famous phrase, which I love, he says, we're a species with amnesia. You know, we've forgotten a lot about our origins. Black Genesis is one of the books that attempts to put this right. But there was a phase between prehistory and history that seems to be lost. Much evidence suggests that around 10,000 BC there was a rather sophisticated civilization that was global. I've just returned from England, by the way, and I've seen Stonehenge and Avebury with authors Andy Collins, who was there, and a variety of others. We've had a 4-day conference. I'm returning there next week. And yeah, I mean, the fingerprints are all over the place, and particularly in Mexico, of course. So I hope that kind of answers what you've asked me.
Yes, it did. Thank you very much. And continue the great work. I look forward to reading it.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for calling in, caller. Excellent commentary. Excellent commentary. And, yeah, as we're winding down, Robert, please take a moment to let everyone know how we can get your tremendous books, Black Genesis and The Master Game, and anything else that you may wish to share with the listeners.
What I'd like, well, first, how to get the books. Very simply, go to the bookshop. But of course, there's Amazon and, that supplies them. The Master Game is available on 24-hour order from Amazon. It's, by the way, done very, very well in the United States. It was #1 on Amazon Prehistory. It topped the top 100, I think, or top 200 in all books. So it's done very, very well. The Master Game, not yet. It will be out in a couple of weeks, fresh from the printers. I'm getting my copies this week. Very keen to see it. So yeah, again in the bookshops. Both are published in the United States. The publisher of Black Genesis is Inner Tradition. Lovely publishers. I get along with them very well. They're in Vermont, and the publishers of the Master Game are in New York. It's Disinformation Inc., run by Gary Bailey, a very good friend of mine. So there you are. You can get these in that way. What I'd like to add is that I've set up. I think I said this at the beginning of the interview. I've set up a blog, which was launched yesterday. It is going to be very interesting. We're going to be reporting, finally, serious and truthful reporting on what is going on in Egypt with the antiquities. We're going to review important issues like Black Genesis, the DNA of Tutankhamun's mummy, and a variety of other things. It's going to be run on a daily basis, and I'll announce that on the internet. I've already announced it on the Facebook. I've announced it on the open internet. So stay tuned, as we say.
Excellent. You also have a conference coming up with Dr. Browder and some other distinguished speakers. Yes, in September.
Thank you, Curtis, for reminding me. Yes, indeed. Whoever lives near Atlanta, please come along. We have this amazing conference in Atlanta called the Nile Civilization Conference. It takes place, I hope I have the dates right, around the 25th and 26th of September. I'll be there myself. Tony Browder will be there. Tom Brophy will be there, and many other scholars. The main thrust of this conference is to put together all these researchers who have bravely come up with their evidence and books and theses on the origins of Black Africa and how it influenced Egyptian civilization and indeed civilization as a whole. So it's a marvelous conference. I look forward to it and hope to see you there, Curtis, if you can make it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. My beloved friend, not just coming from me, but from our entire family, we want to give you a wholehearted thanks for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be here with us on Occult Science Radio, my friend. And hopefully, as we get closer to the conference, hopefully we can get you back on again so we could talk about the book some more, and we could talk about the Master Game some more, and the upcoming conference. My friend, Robert, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure, too. I enjoyed talking on your show, and of course, yes, please let me know if you would like us to come again. It will be a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my friend. Be well, and yes, I will be contacting you shortly to set up your next appearance. And everybody, I want to let you know, Black Genesis, it's a must-read. As a matter of fact, I already have Black Genesis, and I'm waiting for the Master Game, but it is a must-read. Thank you once again, my beloved friend.
Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you, and be well, and goodbye. Take care.
You too. You too.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you all again for being here with us today on Occult Science Radio. I am Curtis Davis, a.k.a. The Illuminated One, and today we have with us a gentleman that has co-authored, in addition to writing many other books. Okay, he has co-authored one of the best books I have ever written with another past guest of ours, Robert Bauval. And the name of this book is Black Genesis. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to read that book yet, it is one of the most profound books that I have ever written, or that I've ever read, on ancient Egypt. The name of it is Black Genesis, The Prehistoric Origins of Ancient Egypt, written by both Robert Bauval and our guest today, Dr. Thomas Brophy. He's also written two other books, The Mechanism Demands of Mysticism and The Origin Map. And I've followed this gentleman's work for quite some time. I've seen his videos, and believe me, we're in for a treat today. He has a lot to share with us. So I'm going to hurry up and get through the preliminaries, as I always do, so we can bring our beloved new friend to the forefront. We're going to start off by thanking our sponsor, TON, The Occult Network. That's www.theoccultnetwork.com. And you will also see some of Dr. Brophy's content featured on The Occult Network. And so come by. We have two memberships. We have a free membership and a premium membership, TON Premium, where you will see some of the most in-depth, esoteric content that you will see anywhere on the net, and especially in mainstream media. You can also find us on YouTube under the Occult Network, as well as on Facebook and Twitter. And if you really want to keep up with what's going on with Occult Science Radio, as well as the Occult Network, then find me on Facebook as well, Curtis Illuminated One Davis. So come by, become a friend of mine, and I always like to meet new people. So become a friend of mine, and then you will definitely be plugged in on what's going on Occult Science Radio, as well as the Occult Network. So please call in with your questions today, my friends, at 646-649-1987. That's 646-649-1987. And please, if you wish to ask our distinguished guest a question or make a comment, don't forget to press number 1 so we can see you on the switchboard and take your wonderful questions and comments. Okay, now that we've gotten through that, it's time to bring our distinguished friend to the forefront. Dr. Brophy, are you with us?
Yes, Curtis. Very nice to be here.
Yes, glad to have you, my friend. You know, like I said, as we were talking in our personal conversation, I feel the circle is complete now. I officially have everybody from the magical Egypt and and the Pyramid Code and the Great Work gang finally on Occult Science Radio. You know, I mean, John Anthony's been here. Oh, yes, to say the least. You know, and they've all shared wonderful information with us. And from the feedback we've gotten, as a matter of fact, everybody's telling me to start the cycle all over again, you know, to bring everybody back. But this is your first time with us, Dr. Brophy, the first of many appearances to come, I'll have you know, because you have so much to share. So before we get into the good stuff, just give us a brief background on yourself, because, your biography and what you've done, concerning, physics and your study of ancient Egypt, I'm quite sure, those of us who are joining for the first time and who are first becoming familiar with you would love to hear.
Okay. If you like, I could tell a little story about my background.
Certainly.
It's a little bit varied, so it may take a few sentences. but here goes. The pertinent parts of it to the writing of these books would be I did my PhD work at the University of Colorado Boulder with the Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics, where we had an instrument on board the Voyager spacecraft. But my degrees, all my undergraduate degrees were in, all of my degrees were in physics. And undergraduate degree was minored in philosophy. And that sort of presages my eventual direction. After some research work after my PhD, I reconnected with my philosophical interests and started drafting that book, the first one you mentioned, The Mechanism, Demands, and Mysticism, and also worked in industry, and eventually connect up with a Japanese yogi, Shinto priest, and scholar named Hiroshi Motoyama, who invited me to California to be dean of administration of a graduate school that he was beginning and research center here. So I accepted that and left my industry job and then refocused on the sort of dual or integrative interests of science and spirituality and bringing them together and advancing an integral view into the future. And along the lines, when I had time to research something new, I got very interested in the ancient Egyptian studies, and especially the work by Robert Schock and Robert Bauval that suggested that there were elements of the Giza Plateau, the ancient Egyptian monuments, that were much older than the standardly accepted date. So, because some of that, related to my background, where I had calculated celestial mechanics and that sort of thing, so I had a background to calculate precisely, and I set out to test, whether Bauval's Orion correlation idea was at least technically fitting, and that's how I got started researching this stuff. And then I could launch off from there into how I specifically came to partner with Bauval about this recent book, Black Genesis, if you like.
Oh, absolutely. That's where we were going anyway.
Okay. That would start with my researches on the astronomy of the site called Nabta Playa in the desert in southern Egypt. I wrote up some of that research in a book called The Origin Map. And then after a while, I started receiving some of the most enthusiastic responses to that from African-American scholars. At the time, I didn't really anticipate that because when I was researching the astronomy of Nabta Playa, I had approached it simply as a sort of astronomical puzzle, a sort of technical puzzle. Back in around 1998, the NASA site gained a little international fame with press releases and a scientific article in Nature magazine indicating it was the oldest astronomical site in the world. But that article, that was by researchers Melville and Wendorf et al., that article actually left much of the interpretation of the site as a mystery. So I initially approached my study of Nabta Playa as if the unexplained parts were simply a puzzle, an astronomical puzzle. And I suggested some solutions to the puzzle in the origin map. And then I get all this support from, or interest from black African scholars. And when I was doing my puzzle solving, I had no interest in what color the people were. I was just doing, I thought, technical astronomy. I hadn't even thought about it. But from the responses, it became clear that the fact that the people who built Nabta Playa were Africans, or as we describe, black Africans, and the fact that there are indications those people were a very advanced culture is considered important to a lot of scholars who aren't so grounded in the physical sciences as I used to be, who do seem concerned with it. back to the story of teaming up with Robert Bauval, which is also the story of what's in the book, really. Around that time, I continued my studies and took data on site at Nabta Playa and using satellite imagery that was newly available, and published a paper on it in a peer-reviewed archaeology journal, together with my longtime colleague Paul Rosen, who now runs Radar Science Division at Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And, of course, Robert Bauval was also interested in the site relative to his longtime works on ancient Egypt, and we began to discuss some things about it. Meanwhile, at that time, there were hints of other sites deeper in the desert still to be studied. Nabta Playa, by the way, is in a very remote part of the desert. It's in southern Egypt, in the desert, 100 kilometers west from Abu Simbel. And in that part of the desert, 100 kilometers is a long way, so it's pretty remote. Then there was these indications of further in the desert, in the southwest corner of Egypt, and actually the corner of Egypt that borders Sudan and Libya. And some of these sites are in Sudan and Libya. There's areas called Gilf Kabir and Jebel Uwainat, and that's a really amazingly sparsely explored site. It's two massive mountain ranges, like giant mesas, not discovered technically, supposedly not discovered by Europeans until the 20th century. Uwainat was discovered by a British-educated Egyptian explorer named Ahmed Hassan Nain in 1923, and who was the first, modern to travel there. So then, in 2007, there was another bombshell discovery out there in that region. Actually, two discoveries in the Jebel Uwainat region. A pharaonic inscription was found from Old Kingdom times. That's been dated to Old Kingdom times, and it was found by a Maltese explorer, a friend of ours named Mark Borda, and his Egyptian counterpart Mahmoud Marai. And also, they found this wonderful prehistoric rock art, a beautiful cave that had never been discovered until 2007 in that same region. And it's really fantastically beautiful and well preserved. We've got some pictures of it in our book. And it became clear to us, Bauval and I, that these were a major piece of the story of Nabta Playa. And in 2007, we mounted a trip to that region, Jebel Uwainat and Gilf Kabir, and actually North Sudan. And we were the first to make, we also visited a site called Bagnode Circle, which is near the Libyan border in that region. And we followed what's called the Abu Balas Trail, which we talk about in the book, which is now accepted to be, very recently discovered, but now accepted to be a trail that the Old Kingdom pharaohs used to travel back to through that region where the inscriptions were found in the region that is now Central Sahara. They traveled back. They sent expeditions there. The pharaohs did, the Old Kingdom pharaohs, and they, we suggest, were going back to the place of their origins. That's what we suggest in our book, Black Genesis. And that it's the same culture that was building the site of Nabta Playa, which was the same time period before the standard dating of the pharaonic culture. I could go on with some more bits about our expedition, which was really a wonderful thing, fascinating, if you like.
Please. Believe me, as you're talking, I'm sitting here imagining this all in my mind, and all I'm saying is like, wow. So please, go on.
Yeah. This region is really so little explored and remote that it's sort of amazing how little explored it is, partly because the standard Egyptologists, the traditional Egyptologists of modern times, have always focused only on the Nile Valley, and I don't know why. I do know that sort of our rival scholars of the Nabta Playa site mentioned that they'd heard there was interesting stuff out there like 10 years ago, but they never went. Anyhow, we did in 2008. And, for instance, we stopped also at a very ancient stone circle called Bagnold Circle, named after Ralph Bagnold, who first discovered it and mentioned it in a National Geographic article in the, I think it was about 1930. I have to look in the book exactly the date. Ralph Bagnold was a physicist as well as a desert explorer and later leader of the long-range desert expedition, long-range desert corps in World War II. And some of Bagnold's books are still used in, for instance, space exploration about the physics of blown sand. Anyhow, that's a tangent. But we were the first to actually make any measures at all at Bagnold Circle, and one of the first groups to visit. That shows you how little traveled, little studied this region is. And we also, on the way down the Abu Balas Trail, there's a site that is dated to both Old Kingdom times and prehistoric use of this site. It used to be called Jedefre Water Mountain because there's the Pharaoh Jedefre's cartouches there, and Jedefre, of course, was the son of Khufu, who's, according to the standard chronology, is associated with the Great Pyramid. And that's just one bit of multiple evidences that show that the pharaohs were traveling back and forth through this region that we suggest was the origin of where the culture came from. Let's see. And Nabta Playa also is poised in just the right location in space and time to be the precursor culture to Pharaonic Egypt, because this region of the desert, of course, at that time, before 3500 BC, for several thousand years from that earlier, was not desert like it is today. It was fine climate, and in fact, one of the rock art sites at the Gilf Kabir area is known as the Cave of the Swimmers, because there's these wonderful paintings of people diving into water, and there's one that clearly seems to be, most people agree, is a person with fins, on their feet for diving, and that Cave of the Swimmers became a little bit famous in the movie. It was a scene in the movie. What's the name of that movie? The English Patient is set in the Cave of the Swimmers area at Gilf Kabir. So this region became, especially the region around Nabta Playa, which is an incredible site in itself, became hyper-arid, extreme desert, extremely dry, like it is today, right around 3400 BC. And it's right around 3400 BC, 3300 BC, that we see the earliest versions of the dynastic Egypt Nile Valley civilization pop up. So it's pretty easy to connect the dots and say, well, they came from the people who were using Nabta Playa and building Nabta Playa were the same as the precursors of the origin of the pharaohs. And that's the space and time connection, right? But then there's also the cultural connections, the same astronomical, monumentalizing the same stars and astronomical events at Nabta Playa as we see in the very earliest proto-dynastic and Old Kingdom temples on the Nile. That's one of the things we develop in the book, Black Genesis.
I see. Now, from what I've seen of your work, Dr. Brophy, I mean, I've seen many of your content, on YouTube and various other sites. And you've done some extraordinary work in terms of mapping the pyramids and their connection to the stars. And that's I remember one of the first videos I seen, excuse me, of you doing that. I was hooked. I was hooked then, and that's the first time I'd ever heard the word astrophysics. Now, before we get into your work with, the Giza Plateau, as well as you said, Nabta Playa and the Calendar Circle, which I also want to discuss as well, because I learned about that from reading the book. Great book. The name of the book, family, is Black Genesis, The Prehistoric Origins of Ancient Egypt, written by Robert Bauval and our guest today, Dr. Thomas Brophy. But just give us a brief background on what exactly is astrophysics before we get into your work with the pyramid, the Sphinx, and your work with how they correlated to astronomy and possibly astrology.
Right. So, yeah, you would be talking about archaeoastronomy, and archaeoastronomy is really the use of knowledge of astronomy in archaeology and understand the application of knowledge of astronomy to understanding ancient sites, ancient monuments, and ancient cultures. So that's sort of the most simple way to put it. And it often involves comparing the sky as it was observed at the time of interest, in this case 6,000 or 8,000 years ago at Nabta Playa, with calculating the sky as it appeared at that time and place with the monuments that appear to be associated with the sky. At Nabta Playa, for instance, it's pretty much agreed that the long baseline alignments, the megalithic alignments, the alignments of large stones, which radiate out from a central point, they go for 1 or 2 kilometers distant. It's pretty much agreed that they probably were associated with the stars. The purpose that they were built for had something to do with stars. So when you have a site like that where it probably has something to do with stars and it has alignments, you can calculate how the sky was at that time and make connections with the temples on the ground, the stone megaliths on the ground, and then connect that with the other knowledge of the culture of the people at the time. That's basically archaeoastronomy. And the connection with astrophysics is that astrophysics knows how to calculate the way the sky moves long term very well. And so, it's the technical part of calculating that is astrophysics.
Ah, I see. Now I'm going to ask you the $1,000,000 question. You know, I've asked it to John Anthony, Dr. Shock, Dr. Bolter, and the whole gang. You know, so you're the only. So it's your turn now, Dr. Brophy. The $1,000,000 question. As far as you know, according to the extensive work that you've done, you know, concerning the Giza Plateau. You know, and how it matches up with the stars. Question number one: according to your estimation, what was when we look at the Giza Plateau? What was the original function of the Great Pyramids? Okay, that's question number one. And question number two: who, in your opinion, you know, actually constructed the Great Pyramids? Because I've been hearing for many years that even today, you know, modern architects cannot figure out. I mean, with all the sophisticated technology we have now in the 21st century, you know, and what have you. But I heard that even today, you know, modern architects are still been scratching their head for like the last gazillion years, wondering how the hell or who the hell did this, because even with their modern machinery and computer technology, they still can't figure out how it was done. So question number one is, what was the original function of the pyramids, the Giza Plateau, and who do you believe actually constructed the pyramids?
Okay, well, those are great questions. And like you say, everybody still, I don't want to say argues about it, but is mystified by it, I think. And especially, like you mentioned, okay, the building of the Great Pyramid. Not just the fact that parts of it are built out of gigantic stones, and it's also questions of logistically, how did they do it? I think if suppose it was built in 20 years' time, it would have been placed like one of those giant pyramid stones every 9 seconds or something like that. I don't remember the exact number, but something like that. And Robert Bauval's brother, Jean-Paul, is an architect, and Robert used to be a construction engineer years ago. They talked about at a conference I was speaking at with them not long ago. That logistical aspect is even just that. Forget about lifting the gigantic stones. Is something that apparently modern day construction engineers and architects would balk at. And they would say, "Oh, probably can't be done today in that fast." Even though we can move the stones today and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's there are these paradoxes in that question, and I could go into the thoughts about the purpose by talking a little bit about the archaeoastronomical studies we include in Black Genesis, as well as I talked about a little bit in the origin map, and something new that a new bit of study that is included in an appendix in the Black Genesis book. I'm saying I'd like to tell a little story about these few elements by way of answering that question. As you know, that's a way of saying I don't have a simple, complete answer, but I could give a sort of perspective towards part of my notion of some of what the purpose may have been by talking about the astronomy as it goes back through time, if you like.
Please.
So, good. In the book, one thing we do is show a very clear connection of tracking the very bright star Sirius, it's the brightest star in the sky, at Naphtha Playa in exactly the same way as it is tracked in the earliest Nile Valley temples. For instance, on Elephantine Island, which is down there, southern Nile, sort of more direct route from Naphtha Playa to the Nile, tracking the rising of the bright star Sirius in the same way. At Naphtha Playa in the time frame 4,500 BC at least, maybe earlier, to 3,500 BC, and then 3,400 BC and onward at the Nile Valley temples, and especially the one on the Elephantine Island. And what they do is they align with the rising of Sirius simultaneously with an alignment of one of the circumpolar stars. At the time, the circumpolar constellation, that means the constellation of stars that rotate around the invariant point in this northern sky, which we call what nowadays is near Polaris, the North Star. At the time, it was the circumpolar constellation was what we call the Big Dipper. The ancient Egyptians just call it the Bull's Thigh constellation. So they had this simultaneously tracking of the rising of Sirius with the Bull's Thigh constellation at Naphtha Playa earlier, 4,000 BC, and up to 3,500 BC, and then it pops up on this temple on Elephantine Island, 3,400 BC. And that temple on Elephantine Island, they rebuilt, I don't know, for 2,000 years or something, every so often, and they each time realign it to the rising of Sirius, just like they realigned the megaliths at Naphtha Playa to the rising of Sirius, in this same way of also simultaneously rising to aligning to the North Stars. So this attention to the rising of Sirius and the use of Sirius to both create an annual calendar and the what's called the heliacal rising of Sirius, which is just the rising of Sirius before the sun, the day of the year when Sirius rises before the sun. So you can first see it just a bit above the horizon. It's called the heliacal rising. That happens once a year because Sirius disappears for some period, 60 days or something at that time, every year, and then it reappears. And that was the mark of the new year in ancient Egyptian calendar. And we think it was also the mark of the new year in the earlier Naphtha Playa astro-ceremonialism. And it was very convenient because that heliacal rising of Sirius marked the time of year when the rising of the floodwaters of the Nile was expected in Pharaonic Egypt, and that, of course, is the life-giving source of the whole civilization. And interestingly, it was also in the years before 3,500 BC, in the centuries before 3,500 BC, that heliacal rising of Sirius at Naphtha Playa was the marker of the monsoon rains. So the reason the Sahara was not desert at that time in that area was because the monsoon rain pattern had not moved south yet. So it would still hit every year, Naphtha Playa. And that's why it's called a playa. It was a seasonal lake. It would fill up with water during the monsoon season. So anyhow, that heliacal rising of Sirius marked the life-giving monsoon at Naphtha Playa. And then as time went on, the centuries went on, and the monsoons moved south. I'm kind of gesturing a lot with my hands here. I shouldn't be doing that on the radio. As the monsoons moved south, it was the same event. The monsoons way in the upper Nile create the flooding of the Nile, which comes up into north into the Nile Valley. And it's interesting that the Egyptians of like the time of Herodotus, much later, seem to have forgotten that. but they still worshipped, the rising of Sirius as the marker of the flood to come. But they forgot where the flood came from. But we think they thousands of years earlier they remembered where the flood came from, and that's why the Old Kingdom pharaohs were still traveling back to their roots in the central Sahara region. So anyhow, back to the astronomy. So there seems to be a dual dating involved in the Giza Plateau, right? I support the idea that the layout of the Great Pyramids, three Great Pyramids, appears to match the three stars of Orion's belt. And when it matches best is way back in time, around 11,000 BC, at a time that is called Zep Tepi. Excuse me, a bit of a cough there. Zep Tepi, which is spoken of in the pyramid texts in the Old Kingdom Egyptian text as a time of the origin of the pharaohs. Okay, but then there was clearly all this activity at Giza Plateau in the standard dating around the 4th dynasty, 2600 BC, and the shafts in the Great Pyramid that used to be called the air shafts, now it's pretty well accepted they're probably directed towards stars, were meant to be directed towards stars. They point to the stars of Orion's belt around that time, that the traditionally viewed time for building of the Great Pyramid, around 2500 BC. So you got this sort of dual dating, the time of the 4th dynasty pharaohs, and also harking back to the much earlier Zep Tepi time. So, and then in Black Genesis, we track the related astronomy. We can go into how the rising of Sirius is also related to Orion's belt, and the related astronomy back through the earlier culture in Nabta-Playa. So now we're going back 3500 BC, 4500 BC. Probably there was visitors at Nabta-Playa, or there were people using Nabta-Playa at 8000 BC, and there's hints of a monumental architecture that it has to be much older. So there's this culture going back in time. Now we're heading back towards that Zep Tepi time. It's not clear whether Nabta-Playa may go all the way back there, and whether the Sphinx may date to that earlier time. So we suggest that there may have been some actual physical construction, if not the completed pyramids, some monumental architecture at Giza Plateau, even at very much earlier time. And one further bit of evidence that I found while we were researching and putting together the Black Genesis book, it's in an appendix in that book, has to do with the underground shafts. You know what I mean by the underground shaft at the Great Pyramid? The underground passage, they sometimes call it. Yeah. There are two main chambers in the Great Pyramid above ground. There's the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber. And from each of those, there's two very narrow shafts that align along the north-south line and up into the sky. And those have been associated, like I said, with stars. Then underneath the Great Pyramid, down into the bedrock, there's a shaft, a big shaft, that's called the underground passage, and it goes down to an underground chamber, which is under basically the middle of the Great Pyramid, way down under the bedrock. So it's way underneath the Great Pyramid. That shaft is big. You can walk down it. I think you can't stand up and walk down it. You can stoop and walk down it. But it's extremely precisely aligned. That was known since the time of Flinders Petrie, who measured the pyramids very accurately, It's extremely precisely aligned, like even better aligned than the shafts from the King's Chamber, the small little few centimeter cross shafts. Those are the ones they sent the robot up to find the door at the end of the shaft, and they drilled in the door recently. Anyhow, this underground shaft is bigger, it's more precise, and it's been a mystery for a long time because people have attempted to align it with, like the others, it probably aligned with meant to align with a star or a set of stars, and there doesn't seem to be anything around that time. It's just a few degrees off of true north, the true north pole point in the sky. So, at Naphtha Playa, in that origin map book, I found suggestions of a lot of attention to the very bright northern star Vega. And in very ancient times, thousands of years before Old Kingdom times, Vega was a North Star. It is the closest bright star to the point in the sky that's the North Pole. And Vega so it was also the brightest North Star ever, because it's one of the brightest stars in the sky. And the North Polar point in the sky moves through the 26,000-year precession of the equinox cycle. And so I decided to look at, there's suggestions of something at Giza, very early times. Let's look at the Vega in association with the underground passage, that underground shaft. And it turns out that Vega, when it was the North Star, around 12,000 BC, shone exactly down the center of that shaft. And it shined exactly down the center of that shaft, not just at one time. If you pick a point in the sky and wait long enough, thousands of years, many stars will pass by it. But Vega went down that shaft right in the center of it, exactly when it was also closest to the North Pole that it ever gets in the 26,000-year cycle.
Wow.
So that was very interesting. Now, in archaeoastronomy, excuse me, in archaeoastronomy, you have to be careful not to just take one bit of data and use that as proof of meaning, right? Because there's a possibility, like I said, of many stars. So I looked at the other Great Pyramids. There's only like 6 of what could really be called Great Pyramids that were built in Old Kingdom times. There's the 3 on the Giza Plateau, and then there's the Bent Pyramid at Dashur is one of them, built by Khufu's father, Senefru. And the Bent Pyramid is the only other one which is huge, by the way, and there's controversy as to why it's bent. It wasn't just poorly built. There's something about why it has these 2 angles. It's the only other one that has a really precisely aligned underground passage like the Great Pyramid at Giza.
Mm.
So I looked at that shaft, which is a little bit different latitude. Turns out it pointed to exactly the same thing. The brightest North Star ever, Vega, when it was exactly at its northernmost point ever in its 26,000-year cycle. And so you've got these 2 shafts, the only 2 major underground shafts of the major, the giant pyramid, and they both point to the same thing. So anyhow, that's a bit of evidence that we go into in an appendix in the Black Genesis book about these more and more suggestions of something very ancient at Giza around this Zep-Tepi time. So there seems to be sort of 2 times of development of the plateau. And so something to be looked at further is whether it could be that the culture, whether if there was some continuity of culture through all those thousands of years. And we are finding a continuity of culture at Nabta Playa for at least a few thousand years, and then we're finding that into the Old Kingdom Egyptian culture another few thousand years. So it's not out of the question to think, oh, maybe it goes back a few more thousand years to the Tupi time. But that earlier time is something still to be worked out and investigated.
I see. Wow. And once again, everyone, the name of the book, this is a must-have book. I'm still reading it. I'm almost finished, but it is one of the best books that I've certainly ever read because I've always had a keen interest in ancient Egypt. The name of the book is Black Genesis, The Prehistoric Origins of Ancient Egypt, written by Robert Bauval and Dr. Thomas Brophy, our guest today. And Robert Bauval will be with us on August 13th, so please tune in for that one as well. But one of the things that really fascinated me about the book, Dr. Brophy, is when you began talking about the calendar circle and Imhotep. And when I began reading about that, it's like, wow, Dr. Brophy and Robert Bauval, as you said earlier, when we think of ancient Egypt, basically everybody just thinks of the Great Pyramids, the Giza Plateau, and the Sphinx, and it stops there. But it seems like you and Robert have taken it, just a step further. You really delved into the ancient Egyptian culture and how they mapped time, and their other great innovations. Tell us a little bit more about the calendar circle and Imhotep.
Sure. There's, for example, the calendar wall at the step pyramid complex at Saqqara, which in a sense is the first great pyramid complex, and it was, we think, designed and implemented by the great genius Imhotep. He was sort of a Leonardo da Vinci of that time and place. And there is surrounding it the whole step pyramid complex at Saqqara. I don't remember all the details. I leave some details to be looked up again in the book. Einstein said, never remember anything you can look up. Anyhow, the step pyramid complex is really amazing. This calendar wall is gigantic. It's I don't know how many meters. It's like 8 meters high, and it surrounds this whole gigantic step pyramid complex, and it's got these carefully placed alcoves and changes in right-angled blips on it that are obviously very carefully placed and very carefully arranged, and they have a specific number on the north side and the south side and east side and the west side of this well-aligned wall. And it's been called a calendar wall because there's numerous reasons to think it has something to do with the origin of the calendar, the way these pillars on this wall, this giant wall. So it's really a monument in itself, created by Imhotep, designed by Imhotep. The way these pillars were arranged and their count seems to be associated with what's called the Sothic cycle, which is, it's in simplest terms, I already mentioned the the way that the ancients used the heliacal rising of the bright star Sirius as the new year every year. If you imagine that rising of Sirius every year as one day of the year, and then the fact that they also had a civil calendar, which is basically like a human-made calendar. So the heliacal rising of Sirius is a celestial-made calendar, right? It depends on when Sirius decides to rise. And then there's a human-made calendar, which is exactly 365 days every year. And the two are pretty close, like we know today. That's why we have a leap year every 4 years. The two are pretty close, but they drift a little bit with respect to each other, right? The Sirius New Year Day and the civil calendar New Year Day, they drift a little bit with each other. And the ancient Egyptians, instead of adding a leap year every year, they just let it drift, and they knew that it drifted, and they apparently used the two calendars for different purposes. Probably the Sirius, the cosmic calendar, for more religious celestial purposes, and the civil calendar for legal purposes and taxes and stuff. And that exact shift of the star calendar and the civil calendar can be calculated from astronomy, and it takes about 1,460 years. No, not exactly 1,460 years. That changes a little bit because of the way the sky moves. And, of course, the shift is due to what's called the precession of the equinoxes, which is the same cycle as the 26,000-year cycle of the whole heavens that I've already mentioned. So it seems that if we interpret that calendar wall, huge monumental calendar wall designed by Imhotep, as representing, because on one side of the wall it's got, I think, 1,458 of those pillars, and on the other side, I think 1,460. I don't remember the exact numbers, got to look it up, but it's a very small difference like that, like 2. And if you go back and calculate, which we can now do, we weren't able to do this sort of precise calculation until recently, by the way. Anyhow, if you go back and calculate at exactly the time that we think that calendar wall was built, the Sothic cycle preceding that time was exactly the number of pillars on one side of that wall, and the Sothic cycle after that time was exactly the number of pillars on the other side of that wall. It's pretty astonishing. And so it suggests that Imhotep was part of a tradition that had a precise knowledge of this drifting astronomy of the rising of Sirius. It's kind of similar to, the ancient Mayans had a very extremely precise knowledge, everybody accepts it, of the cycle of Venus. And this level of precision of Imhotep would have been similar level of precision. So I start off talking about the Imhotep calendar wall. And the other thing you mentioned was the calendar circle, which is at Nabta Playa site. And we don't have names associated with who built that because we don't have names for anybody at Nabta Playa. It's prehistory. But the calendar circle seems to offer another clear connection of this tracking of the same astronomy back in time through the oldest Old Kingdom Nile Valley culture, early into the earlier Nabta Playa culture, and then maybe even back further to the very early Zep-Tepi time. So the calendar circle, which was pretty well accepted to have been built around 5000 BC, roughly, because there were, radiocarbon dates of charcoal, I think, discovered in campfire pits nearby, the calendar circle, that were dated to 4800 BC. So, by that very traditional dating method, that's when it's considered to have been built. And the calendar circle is not a megalithic construction like the other alignments at Nabta Playa are. It's sort of human-sized. It's, I think, 4 meters across, size of roughly 2 men laying down. And the stones themselves, they come up to about your knee. But what it seems to do is it has these gates on a circle that point to the rising of the sun around the day of summer solstice. So that's when the sun is furthermost north in the year on its cycle, the sun's cycle through the year. And then what I did was interpret the 6 standing stones in the center of the calendar circle as possibly relating to the sky. Because the other bit of the other gate on the other part of the circle was the north-south gate. That's what astronomers call a meridian gate, because the north-south line is the line in the sky called the meridian that astronomers to this day still use as a general reference line for measuring viewing stars. So I suggested, well, you got this one gate on the circle pointing to the summer solstice sunrise, and the other gate pointing to the meridian. Maybe it's telling us, look in the sky, and look in the meridian in the sky, look up, around the day of summer solstice. And that's what the 6 standing stones in the center of the calendar circle might be referring to. And it turns out, if you looked up and followed those stones on the ground as if they were a map of stars in the sky, you looked up around 5000 BC, those stones in the center are in sort of the 6 stones in 2 sets of 3. One of those sets of 3 was right there with the Orion's belt on the meridian, 5000 BC, just before summer solstice sunrise, on the day of summer solstice. So that it all fits together that they were tracking the stars of Orion's belt 5000 BC at Namta Playa. And so we find that also in the Nile Valley culture monuments, Old Kingdom times. Then we find it 2,000 years earlier at least, probably 3,000 years earlier at Namta Playa, and perhaps again another 6,000 years before that at Giza Plateau. So we're starting to fill in these gaps of great antiquity. And of course, there's new things even outside of Egypt being found that are forcing us to see the great antiquity of man. Like the Göbekli Tepe site in Turkey, that's dates to 8 to 10,000 BC, I think it is, and it's monumental stone architecture. So we're continually making progress, and we're filling in these gaps, and we're finding very clearly that the Pharaonic culture came from these earlier people in the region that's now Central Sahara. And then if we go back further in time of where they were coming from, we go back into more mystery. But there's a bit of evidence at Namta Playa itself that is very intriguing. That's what's called the bedrock sculptures. Should I describe what those are?
Oh, yes, please. Please.
Okay. If you kind of envision the Namta Playa site, it's called a playa because it was a seasonal lake bed, about 8 kilometers across or so. And during the times when there was a rainy season, the sediments built up in the lake bed. And at the bottom of the lake bed, underneath the sediments, is rock, bedrock. So what was discovered in the late 1970s and to today was the lineaments of megaliths, large stones that were placed on top of or into the sediments of the ancient lake bed. So you can see them if you go there. They're setting on top of the sediments, although some of them have been moved, but they're setting on top of the sediments. And then, when they excavated, underneath these megaliths that are on top of the sediments, especially the central one. So, the megaliths at Nabta Playa, they radiate out from one central point. They call that central point complex structure A because it had a complex arrangement of large stones, megaliths, on top of the sediments. So when they excavated down underneath that arrangement on top of the sediments, they found two things. They found a beautifully sculpted into a weird geometric form that looks, some people say, resembles a cow, large stone, almost 2 meters across, this sculpture. And that sculpture had been buried there, and the sediments filled back in, and the arrangement of megalithic stones placed on top. And then underneath that cow stone, or whatever sculpture it is, there was another sculpted, sculpted bedrock lump. So the bedrock, remember, is underneath the sediments, which came with the rains, which started laying down around 9,000 BC. So from 9,000 BC to 5,000 BC, these sediments were building up. And, in archaeology, that's the standard modern method. Stuff that's found in older sediments is considered to be older. Stuff that's found in newer sediments is considered to be younger, right? And generally, as you dig down, you get the older stuff. So underneath these surface megalithic stones that were placed by humans, there's a sculpted lump of bedrock that was sculpted by humans, and then arranged with this other sculpture placed on top of it, and then all the other stones placed on top of that. And those were placed around 5,000 BC, or earlier, or more recent, because that's when the sediments stopped, around 5,000 BC. The rains didn't stop completely until 3,500 BC, but the heavy sedimentation stopped around 5,000 BC. So when archaeologists excavated that bedrock sculpture, they were mystified because those sediments, it was underneath sediments that were started to be laid down around 9,000 BC or 8,000 BC, and that's firmly in what they thought of as Neolithic culture, and as even the chief archaeologist Fred Wendorf says a couple of times in his writings, those cultures weren't supposed to do that sort of thing back then. So they first trying to explain these bedrock sculptures. There's several of them, by the way. There's one underneath every single of the complex megalithic constructions on the surface of the playa. They dug down through 3 of them. There's dozens of them, or I don't know, 2 or 3 dozen. They dug down through only 3 of them and found each one has this bedrock sculpture underneath. They don't all have the cow stone like the big central one did. Anyhow, their first attempt at explaining how the people of the time built those bedrock sculptures was this. They said, okay, sometime more recent than 5,000 BC, when all the sediments were there, some people somehow figured out where a lump of bedrock was underneath. This is under like 3 meters or so of sediments, 10 feet of sediments, heavy sediment, dirt. They actually published this explanation as the first explanation. Somehow the people around 5,000 BC figured out where this bedrock sculpture was, bedrock lump was, dug down, sculpted the lump, put the other sculpture there, then filled all the sediments back in, then the brains, the megaliths on top. Now, that's pretty convoluted reason for a number of reasons. For one, there was no way for people 5,000 BC to know where these lumps were under the sediments. And there's no evidence that they were doing things like digging test wells or anything like that. So it's really not a plausible explanation. I suggested, and actually Rosen and I did in our paper that we managed to get published in a peer-reviewed journal, 2005, that we suggested that a more likely explanation was that those bedrock sculptures were indeed older, and they became part of, they were consciously made part of the later astroceremonial structures at Nabta Playa, which date to about all the way up to after the sedimentation ended, 5,000 BC, on up to 3,500 BC. And to our amazement, in a 2007 paper, those original authors agreed with us. That it's more likely that those bedrock sculptures are more ancient and were somehow maintained by markers or something by the culture that was using the site as an astroceremonial complex. So that suggests cultural continuity back way further in time, back to when those bedrock sculptures were made. And what those bedrock sculptures, were intended to mean, or what sort of culture they were associated with, is quite mysterious.
Wow. Because from reading the book, I learned some things that, I thought I knew a lot about ancient Egypt. But, to have you and Robert bringing to the forefront that many of these discoveries, because, as I said earlier, that most of the time when people study Egypt, they just look at the pyramids and the Sphinx, and that's as far as it goes. But, you and Robert, you guys took it like 1,000 miles further. And as I read the book, because I'm still reading it, from what I'm reading, as soon as I get to the last page, I'm going to start all over again. Once again, family, the name of the book is Black Genesis, The Prehistoric Origins of Ancient Egypt, written by Robert Bauval, and our guest today, Dr. Thomas Brophy. A must-have. Believe me, from what I'm reading, and I'm not just saying this because Dr. Brophy's here, because I've been studying ancient Egypt a long time. Haven't been there yet. I'm planning to go very shortly, but from what I've read, I thought I knew a lot. This is if you are a serious student of ancient Egypt or ancient Kemet, then this must be in your library. If this is not in your library, well, then you're missing out on some very good information, because what I've gathered from the information that Dr. Brophy and Robert have brought out is that all of these ancient sites that you both discovered, there's a advanced African black civilization that was behind, these ancient structures and these ancient sites.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, absolutely. That's right. And it's pretty much without question now. In the Black Genesis book, we pretty much stuck to the very well accepted stuff. We just put it together and sort of let the cards fall where they do, and talked about these aspects of what that culture really was in ways that Robert goes into this, in ways that modern Egyptologists have not wanted to talk about for various, perhaps cultural bias reasons or whatever, political reasons. So we stick to very well accepted stuff we bring together from various subfields. And in the appendices, we have some more technical things and and some more some more speculative topics, like I was describing a bit here. But as far as the main text, it's very well accepted, and it's really only the interpretations and the emphasis that we include that is, we think, is also pretty well accepted, but just kind of hasn't been wanted to be talked about until now. And of course, all this recent evidence that the pharaonic inscription it was only discovered in the year 2007, and Nabta Playa recently excavated and recently discovered and recently interpreted just cements this, that a lot of Egyptologists kind of knew or suspected all along that the origins of the pharaonic civilization really came from the Central Sahara region.
I see. And as we wind down, Dr. Brophy, there's a question or two from the switchboard. You know, we're going to start off taking our first caller. We have a caller from the 301 area code. Caller, if you're there, please state your name and where you're calling from.
Hello, this is Tony Browder from Washington, D.C. area. How are you?
Oh, Dr. Browder, excuse me a minute, Dr. Brophy. Oh, Dr. Browder, I have a bone to pick with you. I've been chasing you down for who knows how long, but go ahead and ask your question, and then I'm going to grab you and not let you go anywhere.
Okay, well, great. Well, actually, a good friend of mine, Akoso Reedy from Atlanta, texted me and told me that Dr. Brophy was on, and I've been listening to the show for the past half an hour or so. Dr. Brophy, I truly want to thank you and Robert for writing a very important book that is going to help set the record straight about the history of ancient Kemet, who those ancient people were, and the science and technology that they used to jumpstart a Nile Valley culture and civilization. I had the pleasure of meeting Robert last February when we brought him to Washington to give a presentation at the University of the District of Columbia. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you, Dr. Brophy, in September at the Nile Valley Conference. So I thank you so much for the work that you've done, sir.
Oh, well, it's great to hear from you, Tony. Yeah, Robert told me all about meeting you, and we certainly appreciate you offered a nice comment that we use on the cover of back cover of our book. And, yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting you in September also at that conference.
Very good, very good. Well, thank you so much, and I'll talk with you later about some other things that we want to do, because we're going to be spending some time with Robert here on the East Coast after the Nile Valley Conference. We really want to introduce this information to the larger African American community, because what you have, the information that you have compiled is so profoundly significant that we have to expose as many people as possible to the history, the science, and the technology that is in Black Genesis.
Yes,
absolutely.
indeed.
And it is the history of us all too, right?
Yes, indeed.
So, yeah.
Oh yes. Oh God, this is a pleasant surprise. I'm in awe. You know, I have Dr. Brophy on one side and Dr. Browder on the other side. Oh, I mean, wow, what great thing did I do to deserve this? I must be doing something right. Thank you so much for calling in, Dr. Browder. Oh, Dr. Browder, you know, believe me, you're next. You know, I mean, I've been trying to get you as a guest on Occult Science Radio for a long time. So, yeah, you know, write down Occult Science Radio, Curtis Davis, the Illuminated One, because I'm definitely calling you next, my brother.
Okay, well, I just got back from Egypt 2 weeks ago. We've been excavating there for a month at a 25th Dynasty tomb, and I've got a lot of information I'd love to share with you and your listeners. So we'll set up a time for an interview in the very near future.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Okay,
thank you so much, Dr. Browder. Thanks for calling in.
You're quite welcome now. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Peace. Likewise. Okay, and we're going to take another caller. We have a caller from the 313 area code. Caller, if you're there, please state your name and where you're calling from. Oh, I guess I guess they're just listening. All right, I don't blame them. When I hear powerful information, I just sit back and listen as well. And we're going to take our next caller from the 510 area code. Caller, if you're there, please state your name and where you're calling from.
Oh, hi, Brother Curtis. I'm just listening. I'm just listening. No real questions. The information is profound and stuff that a lot of us have just been coming into the new understanding of, and it's just great. Just more information will definitely be in my library soon, and just appreciate the work, because it's tough to say what truth is sometimes. It's tough to, tell the truth, and I appreciate that. But I'll continue.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Oh, yeah, thank you so much
yeah,
for calling.
This is Nefer, though. This is Nefer from the chat,
I see. Oh, yes, believe me, I can personally attest. I'm sitting here with the book in my lap right now, and I've been reading it for the past several weeks.
Okay.
This is the type of book that, I demand that everybody, this is the type of book that will keep you up all night. I have never seen anything like it.
Absolutely.
So, yes, I implore everyone to get this book. But thank you so much for calling in, sister.
No problem.
Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our next caller. We have a caller from the 865 area code. Caller, if you're there, please state your name and where you're calling from. I guess they're just listening as well. I don't blame them. Okay, we're going to take our last caller. We have a caller from the 863 area code. Caller, if you're there, please state your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, my name's Dwayne, and I'm calling from Auburndale, Florida.
Hello, Dwayne. How are you, brother?
Doing pretty good, just listening in. I'm definitely going to go out and get your book. I'm a big fan of Robert Bauval, and I have been looking up some, trying to find out some stuff about him here recently, but I don't know, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, really. I've seen all the old stuff, but I haven't seen no new stuff, and I'm happy you guys have a book coming out now.
Oh, good, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh yes. When you read Black Genesis, like I tell everybody, I mean, I've been this book has literally cost me some sleep. I mean, this is a great. I mean, and I've read so much and have seen so much content on ancient Egypt, on ancient Kemet, and believe me, like they say, you always learn new things. Well, this book just proved it. Because I think this book here, Black Genesis, it is going to begin a whole new side. As Dr. Browder said. Now, Dr. Browder, everybody knows Dr. Browder. He doesn't, he's difficult to please. Okay, Dr. Browder doesn't give it up easily. So now to hear Dr. Browder say, hey, everybody go get this book yesterday, that ought to tell you something. Okay, so yes, I implore everybody to definitely go get this book, because now it's going to make everyone look at ancient Egypt in a much different way. Now, a whole lot of truths, as even Dr. Brophy said earlier, a whole lot of truths that have been hidden have now been brought to the forefront. And we have to thank Dr. Brophy and Robert Bauval for that. So everybody, please, I put the link out here in the chat room. Everybody definitely go get this book. And once this book becomes widely read and widely spread, then it's going to, it's going to later bring out a lot of what had been hidden, the history of mankind. So thank you so much for calling in, brother. Please go get the book.
Actually, I got a question for him, too.
Oh, certainly. Please.
I was wondering if he's thought about or seen any research on the I guess the site they found underneath it's like a mud flats, I guess, ancient seabed or something like that, where in the South Spain.
I'm not immediately familiar. Give me a little more detail. Is that a very recently discovered site?
Yeah, very recently. It's actually I'm guessing the guy that's doing the research on it now is like ancient Atlantean guy. He thinks it might be Atlantis. He might have found it, I was thinking maybe it might go along with what you're saying, you know, an ancient black society that had higher technologies.
Well, I have to look into this because just the other day somebody else was, I think they were asking me about that same site, and I haven't really looked at it yet. We do know that the sea level, you know, including the Mediterranean Sea, rose a lot around in the 1,000 or 2,000 years to about 10,000 BC. Many meters. I forget how many meters. So anyhow, yeah, they're very likely.
Yeah, supposedly I guess they found a bunch of small buildings underneath the Mediterranean Sea or Red Sea or something like that. I think it was the Mediterranean.
I've got to look into it. I'm not familiar with that yet, but it sounds very intriguing, and there's definitely more to be discovered.
Yeah, I was just calling to, you know, just see if you might have cross-referenced anything with that scientist or doctor, I mean. But thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'll definitely be listening in on August 13th.
Oh, thank you so much for calling in. Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent questions. You know, and as we wind down, Dr. Brophy, we have about 4 or 5 minutes left. You know, please let everybody know, you know, what you got going on and how you can be reached, and most definitely how to get our hands on. Well, I have it already. Yeah, everybody, I'm bragging. Don't hate. I have the book already. But, yes, and you can also check out Dr. Brophy's website, www.thomasgbrophy.com, you know, where you can also buy the book. It's there, as well as his other books. Unfortunately, that we didn't get a chance to talk about today. I must admit I purposely did that because now I have a reason to bring him back. You know, his other books, The Mechanism, Demands of Mysticism, and The Origin Map. But please take a minute or two, Dr. Brophy, to share with us what you got going on, what you got coming up, and how you can be reached. You know, if anyone has any further questions, and definitely how everybody else can get their hands on this great book, Black Genesis.
Sure. Like you said, people can find my website, thomasgbrophy.com, and I believe there's contact information there as well. And recently I've been updating my Facebook page more. People could find me there. And the book is available. We're pleased that it's actually in bookstores, and Barnes & Noble has it, and, of course, the usual places, Amazon and everything. And we are looking forward to, might not have caught it, Tony Browder mentioned a conference in September 22nd in Atlanta. Robert Bauval and I will both be speaking at a conference called Nile Valley 2 Conference, which is about the origin of Nile Valley civilization, and that's I'll be talking on a specific topic along the lines of what we were talking about in the show today. There. We've got another conference in Dubai in December 3, which will be interesting. And I am working on another book project, but it's bad luck to say too much about such a project until it's
Dr. Brophy, I want to, not just coming from me, but from the entire listening family, we want to thank you for taking time out of your very, very busy schedule to be here with us on Occult Science Radio today. I mean, this book, and believe me, I can't wait to get Robert back on the show. He's been with me before. But we extend a wholehearted thanks to you, my friend, for being here with us today. And I'm already planning your next visit, my friend, so keep us in mind because we just touched the surface today. There's much, much more for you to share with us. Thank you so much, my friend.
Oh, thank you. I look forward to being again. You're a wonderful host.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Browder, if you're still listening out there, we also want to thank you as well for calling in and offering your comments. As I said, stick close to the phone because Dr. Browder, you're going to be next. And thank you all once again, Dr. Browder, Dr. Brophy, and we also want to thank you, beloved listeners, for taking time out of your busy schedule to being here with us today on Occult Science Radio. It's beautiful weather out there today, and you could have been any other place but here, but you chose to be here with us, and we thank you for that. And tune in with us on Tuesday evening when we will have Dr. Mitchell Gibson. And with that, once again, we thank Dr. Brody, Dr. Brophy, and Dr. Browder for being here with us today. And as I always say, beloved family, peace, love, and power. And please, please walk with strength. Peace. Take care, Dr. Brophy.